Okay, Shamgo is asking question.
So my question is that on last Sunday's lecture, you spoke about doing this Antaranga Seva, which means worshipping Radha and Krishna in your mind. And what does this mean exactly in practice?
Antaranga, inner body. So it means, according to Srila Prabhupada's translation, in one's spiritual body. Just like here, now we're worshipping Shambhihar is doing puja to Radha Damodar. He's dressing the deities, undressing the deities, bathing the deities, dressing the deities, feeding the deities, put them to rest, we wake them up. So these are the types of things that one does also in the spiritual world. But in the spiritual world, you do it with the spiritual body. So when one is very spiritually realized, Yam Shama Sundaram Jagannath Swarupam, then he has entrance into the spiritual world. Spiritual world isn't there. Spiritual world is, well, not you, it's in the consciousness. According to our consciousness, and we enter spiritual world. So when someone is very advanced, and even though they're here in this world, especially when they're chanting Hare Krishna, or at other times of day, they may be absorbed in worshipping Radha and Krishna in their eternal spiritual identity in the spiritual body. Cowherd boy, Gopi, Manjari, older Gopi, and so on. So in that way. Raghunath Das Goswami, Lord Chaitanya doesn't say in Chaitanya Charitamrita, but Prabhupada says in the purport that he tells them to actually do this along with Swarup Damodar Goswami. So of course Raghunath Das Goswami is eternally liberated soul. Swarup Damodar Goswami is eternally liberated soul. He's a Manjari, he's Lalita Devi. So what does Swarup Damodar Goswami teach Raghunath Das Goswami? And at this stage, what stage of realization does Raghunath Das Goswami have of his spiritual identity? Later on, he, in his writings, he seems to indicate that it was by Rupa Goswami's grace that he actually fully understood and was able to enter into his eternal identity as a Manjari and serve Srimati Radharani in that Antaranga Seva. And even that was always broken, so that his hankering and his mood of separation would be there, something that we could then follow. So that's in the perfected state. In sort of the semi-perfected state, if a devotee achieves the stage of bhava, he certainly knows he's not this body, and he knows he has a spiritual identity, but he doesn't know the details of that spiritual identity. And so he really can't be directly engaged in spiritual service. And his love isn't mature. So that love has to be mature, and therefore he continues chanting and hearing, and he gets guidance from spiritual master, hopefully. And if that doesn't, well, at that stage he should be able to access spiritual master because he's not conditioned, even though spiritual master may not be physically present. But in any case, he advances spiritually, and so there, his Antaranga Seva is a real aspiration for what the direction that he's being given for the things that he would like to do, not necessarily what he actually is his eternal identity, but his aspiration. And then before that, well, if the devotee has a real strong desire and an attraction, an inclination information, then based on what they've read, they read Srimad Bhagavatam, they read writings of Goswami and other Goswamis, then they'll hear about what did the cowherd boys, how do the cowherd boys serve Krishna, now it's Mother Kartik, now it's the month of Kartik, how does Mother Yashoda serve Krishna, how do the gopis serve, so then they have an inclination and they meditate upon what the gopis, cowherd boys, or some particular gopi and cowherd boy who they're particularly attracted by, how do they serve Krishna? So that's also Antaranga Seva. It's not me, it's somebody else. But the absorption or the meditation is very, very similar. But that's a function of the mind, a purified mind, as opposed to this. It's also a function of the mind, but actually it's prema manifesting within the mind. And here it's the purified mind initiating remembrance. There is a difference between the two. The two look the same because spiritual emotions manifest within the mind, so it looks like it's come from the mind, but actually the mind is just a vehicle. Follow? So that's what we want to attain, but the main obstacle is bodily identification. As long as that identification with the body is strong, you're not going to be inclined to be thinking about any form of service to Krishna. You'll be, first person is struggling to overcome anarthas, or to think about all kinds of material ideas and desires that they have. Those become the meditation rather than this. So the desire has to be there for this type of meditation, and that desire is representative of not just a whimsy, or I have this desire, but then it goes, but it's actually symptomatic of somebody's level of Krishna consciousness. Shada, sadhu sangha, bhajana kriya, nishta, ruchi, and so on. But one's qualification is always determined by how well one chants Hare Krishna and what's happening when one is chanting Hare Krishna. So to chant japa, one's mind is fixed on the holy name, and it doesn't deviate and it doesn't get distracted, then naturally Krishna's name will give one direction, either in details or direction in what particular thing to do. So, these things we should know, because it's the treasure house of Krishna consciousness that we're given. But at the same time, we should know when these things are implemented. I'm going somewhere, I know where I want to go, but if I just get lost in going where I want to go, then I'm going to have an accident. You're driving a car, you're going to smash into a wall or smash into somebody else. So where do I have to pay attention to where I am and the immediate distance. You're driving a car, you're driving a bicycle, you pay attention to a certain distance that's relevant to you. If you're, again, looking too far ahead, then again you crash. Because you have to see where I'm going immediately and where is a reasonable next distance that I want to go. But I always have to know, this is where I want to go, otherwise we just drive around in circles. Otherwise there's no point in that either. So those things have to be there, and I have to know what's the path to get there. And that's why devotees need to study Krishna consciousness. I have to, one thing is that I hear it, but I have to meditate these things, I have to study this, I have to put Srila Prabhupada's books together to understand what is sadhya and what is the path of sadhana that gets us there. And that's why Lord Chaitanya went through it. What is sadhu? What is sadhu? Okay, it's varnashram. No, there's more than varnashram. You have to practice varnashram, but that's not all that there is. There's more. So then you have to hear. Then it's stani stita shuti gitan. Okay, now that's the beginning. Now tell me more and tell me more. Because Lord Chaitanya is just going, he wants to know step by step. We should know where it is that we want to go. Then when Ramana says, now yes, there's nothing more than this. I didn't know there was anybody. Well, Ramananda Roy says, I didn't know there was anybody in the world who could ask beyond this. He knew beyond this. I didn't know anything as beyond this. And then it's such a wonderful thing, this he says, that's all right, but please continue. Lord Chaitanya says, he's talking now about Radha and Krishna, and then he says, Ramananda Roy says, well, I don't think my intelligence goes beyond this. He said, but then Ramananda Roy thought, he says, well, I can tell you this thing, but I don't know if you'll be happy to hear it. So then he gives something that he composed himself. And he started to sing this song, and after a while Lord Chaitanya put his hand over his mouth. He said, alas, before we met, there was an initial attachment between us brought about by an exchange of glances. It's purvara. In this way, attachment evolved. That attachment has gradually grown, and there's no limit to it. Now that attachment has become a natural sequence between ourselves. It is not that it is due to Krishna, the enjoyer, nor is it due to me, for I am the enjoyed. It's not like that. This attachment was made possible by mutual meeting. This mutual exchange of attraction is known as Manobhav, or Cupid. Krishna's mind and my mind have merged together. Now, during this time of separation, it's very difficult to explain these loving affairs. My dear friend, though Krishna might have forgotten all these things, you can understand and bring this message to him. But during our first meeting, there was no messenger between us, nor did I request anyone to see him. Indeed, Cupid's 5 arrows were by medium. Now, during this separation, that attraction has increased to another ecstatic state. My dear friend, please act as a messenger on my behalf, because if one is in love with a beautiful person, this is the consequence. Then Lord Chaitanya said that then quoted another verse, and then Lord Chaitanya said, this is the limit of the goal of human life. Only by your mercy have I come to understand it conclusively. The goal of life cannot be achieved unless one practices the process. So sadhyavastu sadhana vinu keha nahi pai. Kripakari kohi roe pavara upai. Now, being merciful upon me, please explain the means by which this goal can be attained. Up to now, he's just talking about the goal. Now he says, now how can I attain it? Ramananda Roy replies, I do not know what I'm saying, but you have made me speak what I have spoken. Be it good or bad, I'm simply repeating that message. Then he says that actually you're just speaking to me. He says the pastimes of Radha and Krishna are very confidential. They cannot be understood through the mellows of servitude, fraternity, or parental affection. Actually, only the gopis have the right to appreciate these transcendental pastimes, and only from them can these pastimes be expanded. Shabdi ek sabki ganira ihan adhikar, sabki hoita hoya e lilara vishna. This is the adhikar. Without the gopis, these pastimes between Radha and Krishna cannot be nourished. Only by their cooperation are such pastimes broadcast. It is their business to taste these mellows. So Sakhi Vina E Lila Pushtana Hihoy, Sakhi Lila Vishtariya, Sakhi Ashvadoy. But Prabhupada is saying that only gopis preach this. It says, only by their cooperation are such pastimes broadcast. No one preaches about this. They're the ones who broadcast it. They're the ones who preach it. So if one has heard or learned these things about gopis, then they must have heard it from the gopis. It is their business to taste the mellow. Sakkivina e lila anyira nahigati, sakki bhave tanri kara anugati. Radha Krishna kunja seva sajja sevhai, se sadhya paito ara nahika upai. Without the help of the gopis, one cannot enter into these pastimes. Only the one who worships the Lord in the ecstasy of the gopis, following in their footsteps, can engage in the service of Shri Radha and Krishna in the groves of Vrindavan. Only then can one understand the conjugal love between Radha and Krishna. There is no other procedure for understanding. So that's why Prabhupada says that Raghunath Das Goswami had to start studying under Swarup Damodar Goswami. He said, no, you do Antaranga Seva.
Very much, Kumraj.
And the more books you distribute, then the more you become qualified. Hare Krishna.